Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about World War II. So we're picking up on where we left last time, which was the Treaty of Versailles ending the First World War. At the end of the First World War, you'll remember the Treaty of Versailles had two important things for Germany. Can you think of what they were? Those things were placing all blame on Germany for the start of World War I and forcing Germany to pay all war debts. So this will have a dramatic effect on Germany, but also on the rest of Europe. Germany is a very big trading power in Europe, and because they're financially unstable, they're going to have a hard time trading goods, which will have an impact on the rest of Europe. And so Europe at this point in time is in a lot of turmoil politically and also economically. And when things are not going well financially for people, or if there's political uncertainty, usually there's going to be some kind of chaos or possibly another world war. That's what we're going to be seeing in this section today. So as we're seeing a lot of uncertainty across Europe, we're going to be seeing people come onto the scene that promise certainty. People like Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, Hirohito in Japan, they're going to be promising order and stability, and to make these things happen, they're going to be asking for ultimate power. And that's where a lot of these dictators are coming from. So we mentioned some of the people in Europe. In Japan, we're going to be seeing Hirohito come to power, and he's going to be expanding a lot in the east, whereas in Europe we're going to be seeing Hitler being one of the primary figures, and he's going to be expanding a lot in the west for Europe. So with these two dictators coming from the east and from the west, we're going to be seeing the Second World War come about. So without getting too far into the details of how the US gets involved, we're going to be seeing the Allies, which will again include the US, Britain, and France, trying to appease or trying to prevent Germany from starting another war. So why do you think Germany wouldn't be interested in participating in another war? And why do you think the Allies, Britain, France, and the US, would not be interested in participating in another war? The answer, as you're probably already thinking about, is because both sides have suffered tremendous losses, both in terms of life and in terms of money. And to start another world war would be another great cost to those two assets, which they don't have a lot of right now. Nonetheless, after a certain point, when Germany is starting to take so much territory, the Allies say to Germany, okay, we recognize you've been through a lot, we recognize that we've taken a lot of money from you, but you can't keep expanding. There has to be a point of stopping. And so we're going to say the territory that you've gained, you can keep. But if you move into Poland, then we're going to have to declare war on you. So inevitably, Hitler does not listen to those orders. He invades Poland. World War II begins. World War II, beginning in 1939, does not immediately involve the Americans. And actually, a lot of the Allies are pretty upset that the Americans are not joining on their side. So imagine you're from Britain or you're from France. Why might you be upset that the Americans are not getting on board with the war right away? One of the answers to that question might be that, hey, you had fought with us in World War I, where's your support now? So Americans not getting involved originally because they're not in Europe, but eventually they will be. And can anyone think of which event that will be? Give you a clue. On December 7th, it was a day that will live in infamy. That's right, it's Pearl Harbor. This is when Japan attacks a naval base in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. Japan being on the side of the Axis powers, that would be Germany, Japan, and Italy. They are going to be attacking the US for trade reasons that you can look up on your own time, and this will draw the US into the Second World War. So now we have two sides, the US, Britain and France on the side of the Allies, Italy, Japan, Germany on the side of the Axis powers. Okay, let's talk about the role of Iowa. A prominent part of Iowa's role would be coming from the 34th Infantry Division. So this division, known as the Red Bulls, it's still a very prominent division in the Iowa National Guard today. And they're playing a critical role in the presence of the US in Northern Africa and also in Italy. So when it comes to Northern Africa, talking about Tunisia, they're going to be helping to seize Hill 609, which is a very important point to gaining Allied victory in Tunisia. And when it comes to Italy, they're going to be holding the Allied line in Salerno with little to no food or resources for up to 5 days. The remainder of the time, after they were done fighting in Italy, in Northern Africa. They spent trying to drive Germany out of the Italian mountains. So 34th Infantry Division, again, the Red Bulls, very present in the Iowa National Guard today, played a very important role in World War II. Many Iowans were involved in this conflict, much more that would cause this presentation to go on for a long period of time. So if you'd like more information, as I mentioned in previous videos, I'd recommend you check out the Iowa Gold Star Museum's website or go there in person to visit. And there you can learn a lot about Iowans that were involved. But to summarize this Second World War, let's talk about how it all came to an end. So we're having both sides fighting it out in Europe. The Soviet Union, who is now on the side of the Allies, is going to be closing in on Germany from the east. The US, the UK, and France are going to be moving in on Germany from the west, and they're effectively going to be surrounding Germany, forcing them to surrender. So after Hitler commits suicide in his bunker, Germany will surrender. That will end the war in Europe. That's going to be called VE, or Victory in Europe. However, think back to when we started this presentation. Who was the US originally attacked by? It was Japan. So even though the war in Europe is closed, there's still a war in the Pacific that's to be fought, and that's against Japan. So what the US maybe lacked in terms of presence in Europe initially, they will definitely make up for in their presence in the war in the Pacific. The war in the Pacific, as you probably know, took place not just on the Japanese mainland, but on many small islands leading up to it. And these islands were, some would argue, a point of justification for why the atomic bomb was dropped. You may have heard of a term called island hopping. This was the term that was used by the American forces as they were fighting against Japan. Why do you think island hopping was the term that they used? Well, the answer would be because they hopped from one island to the next as they defeated Japan, working their way towards the Japanese mainland. The original strategy before nuclear bombs were even invoked were that the US would defeat Japan on these smaller islands, get to the mainland, and eventually force a surrender once the Japanese forces recognized that the Americans would overwhelm them. However, from these small islands, the Americans were beginning to see that the Japanese forces would fight till the bitter end. Some of you may be familiar with samurai culture. An important thing to note is that Bushido, or this idea of dying with honor, or dying to the point where you either kill yourself or you fight to the death, because that's the honorable thing to do in samurai culture, was still very present in the minds of Japanese. And so, that being the mandate, these islands had to be fought until effectively there was no Japanese left. So they didn't wait until they were overwhelmed to surrender. For the most part, the Japanese would fight till their end. And this was very costly in terms of lives for Americans, lives for Japanese, but also overall resources. And so as the Americans were hopping to these islands and facing these Japanese forces that used the code of honor of samurai, Bushido, they were beginning to recognize that this is the price that we're paying for these small islands. What more will we be paying for the Japanese mainland? And so that was part of the reasoning as to why the US decided to drop the 2 atomic bombs. So the 2 atomic bombs were dropped on the Japanese mainland at the war's end. When the first atomic bomb was dropped, the effects on people and on buildings were not well known at the time. They were tested in the Mojave Desert, that's where they were developed, but when it comes to their actual use in real world, it was still unknown. The first atomic bomb was dropped and killed thousands upon thousands of people, destroyed many buildings. But Japan did not surrender at that point in time. So the US came forward, dropped the second atomic bomb. After that second atomic bomb was dropped, then the US gained victory over Japan as Japan surrendered. So finally, in 1945, World War II will come to an end because the Allies will be securing victory not only in Europe, but also in the Pacific. So with this victory in the Pacific, World War II coming to an end, the Allies are victorious, but they are preparing for another conflict. And the conflict that they're preparing for isn't with former Axis powers. It's actually from a power within the Allies, that being the Soviet Union. And as we're going to be seeing in our next conflict, the Soviet Union was dramatically different from the US and its other allies in one major respect. Can you think of what that might be? It's communism. So communism was a form of government that the Soviet Union had adopted. And when it came to deciding who was going to control what countries, this was a major sticking point. And so it was from this idea that the US did not want countries to become communist that we're going to be seeing another conflict happen after World War II, that is the Cold War. So thank you for listening to us this time. That concludes our lesson on World War II. And in our next series, we'll be getting started on a series of conflicts involving the Cold War. Thank you.